My name is Ira Dreyfus. I'm the master of the Patriot Lodge here at George Mason University. We've been here about 13 years. We're a fairly new lodge. We're an academic lodge, as I mentioned earlier. And that means that we sort of specialize in academic level research. The other thing is we're affiliated with the university. So a lot of everybody here is in some way affiliated with actually GMU, either as a student, an alum, a professor. We've had administrative staff from time to time, things like that. I, for instance, am an alum and also a student because I'm on the free gazer program. And in Virginia, anybody over 60 can attend college for free. And so they have to put up with me in Spanish class. I have a big interest in Teddy Roosevelt, especially the man in the arena thing, because that resonates so much with our lodge, with Freemasonry in general. Now, you are not a Freemason.
Correct.
Correct. So we won't tell you any Masonic secrets, and you promise not to divulge them if we do. Okay.
Absolutely. You can trust
me. All right. I thought so. William Hansard is with the Theodore Roosevelt Center at Dickinson State University in North Dakota, where I think it's still winter.
A little bit, starting to warm up.
Okay. And 25 now. That is one of the major research centers. Of course, when Theodore Roosevelt was but a youngish man, he was roaming all over the rest, herding cattle and getting in fistfights. He was that kind of a guy. And after his transformation, Mr. Hansard has agreed to talk with us about Teddy Roosevelt and his Freemasonry and how it influenced his life on a personal and professional level. And on that, the show's yours.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you all for having me today. I really appreciate being invited to speak to you. It's interesting because Masonry is a pretty understudied aspect of TR's life, but it was extremely important to him. He really devoted a lot to it, and I ended up finding a lot more information about that than I expected to find. So we're going to go through some of that today. If you'll give me just a moment, I will get my screen shared and we will be all set. So today we're going to talk about Theodore Roosevelt, Master Mason, how the principles and fellowship of Masonry influenced the 26th President of the United States. Before we talk about Masonry specifically, I do want to give you the briefest overview of TR in general as a person, some basic information about him. He was born in Manhattan, 1858. He's a very curious and intelligent child, but he's very sickly. He suffers from debilitating asthma so bad they thought it might kill him. He suffers from congenital heart issues, from stomach problems, what they called cholera morbus at the time. And so as a young boy, a young man, he will take up exercise, outdoorsmanship, hunting, physical activities, the strenuous life you may have heard, to help him overcome some of these issues. And indeed it does. The story's a little more complicated than that, but this strenuous life really, really helps him. His education, he will be homeschooled as a child, tutored by family. He will have an eye to naturalism, to natural history. But then when he goes to Harvard, he will gravitate more toward history and law and politics. He will graduate magna cum laude and go to Columbia Law School, but drops out of Columbia when he is elected to the New York State Assembly. His public service credits are long, numerous. In addition to assemblyman, he serves in the New York National Guard. He serves as a United States Civil Service Commissioner, the New York Police Commissioner, Assistant Secretary of the Navy, from which position he will resign to fight in the Spanish-American War as the leader of the 1st Volunteer Cavalry Regiment, better known as the Rough Riders. He will use that fame as a war hero to catapult him into the governorship of New York. Then the politicians in New York who see him as too much of a reformer will kick him upstairs into the vice presidency, where he will be powerless until President McKinley is assassinated and he becomes President of the United States in 1901. His home will be on Long Island, Oyster Bay, Long Island. He calls it Sagamore Hill, and this is sort of a country farm estate on Long Island, and that's where this picture of him you see here was taken. And as was mentioned earlier, he was also a cattle rancher for a brief period of his life, on a ranch investor in North Dakota, which is why the Theodore Roosevelt Center is here in Dickinson, North Dakota, in the southwestern part of our state. Very briefly, long list of accomplishments as president. He will mediate in a major labor strike for the first time as president. Will establish the Department of Commerce and Labor, which will later be separated. He will conserve 230 million acres of public lands with national parks, national forests, game preserves, monuments, so on and so forth. He establishes the U.S. Forest Service. He will take control of the Panama Canal. That project had begun under the French but was floundering. The construction will be completed a decade later. He's actually the first president to travel abroad while in office when he goes to visit the Panama Canal Zone and the construction taking place. He will be the first American to win the Nobel Peace Prize for negotiating peace in the Russo-Japanese War. He signs the Pure Food and Drug Act. He will send the American Navy to circumnavigate the globe. The list goes on and on. He's a prolific author. He writes about 35 or 40 books, depending on how you count the different volumes and editions, dozens of magazine articles, and more than 150,000 letters over the course of his life. He will go on adventures in Africa, in South America. He will survive an assassin's bullet in 1912. He just lives his life to the absolute fullest until he dies in his sleep from a pulmonary embolism at the age of 60 at his home in New York. So with that, let's talk about TR as a Mason. He will be first introduced to Masonry in 1899 when he is the governor of New York, and he is attending public events. He's attending drill corps events in his capacity as the governor of New York. And later, when he is initiated, he will give a speech crediting these public events as actually one of the things that impresses him and leads him to join the Freemasons. He will be recommended for membership by William J. Youngs, who was a lawyer and a politician in New York, one of his neighbors. And Youngs will also serve as his private secretary while Roosevelt is governor. And the Youngs family is very prominent in Oyster Bay. The Youngs Memorial Cemetery is where Roosevelt and his wife Edith will be buried later. Roosevelt is balloted on December 12, 1900, and initiated as an entered apprentice on January 2nd, 1901, by which time he had moved from being the governor of New York to the vice president-elect. He is entered into the Matinacock Lodge in Oyster Bay, New York. This is on the third floor of the Oyster Bay Bank building, which is actually a very important space to Roosevelt. It's where his secretaries will conduct a lot of his business on other floors of the building as well. And you see on that petition there, those names that you see are several other prominent people of Oyster Bay and prominent Freemasons of the time as well. And also, again, his neighbors on these other estates on Long Island. But this becomes an important part of his life basically from the very beginning. And he will start to move through the degrees very quickly. He also is going to have some support from his wife in doing this, and that becomes an important part of it as well. He has a very strong, mature, healthy relationship with his second wife, Edith. His first wife died tragically shortly after childbirth in 1884. His second wife will actively support the Masons, and she will donate items to be sold, to be auctioned at public fairs. Some of the items I was able to find records of was a doll that the group who took it on, they named it Ruth Roosevelt. She donated walking sticks made of wood from the White House after it was renovated, and wood from the USS Maine that had been blown up in Havana Harbor, a pair of beaded moccasins as well. And there were probably other items as well that I simply didn't see records for. A lot of this will actually come from a Masonic magazine, Masonic Standard in New York. And we'll see that as we move through. I've actually pulled some quotes from them. I found a lot of information in that magazine, which was really, really useful. So for the passing into the second degree and raising into the third degree, he does this very quickly within a matter of weeks. And from the very beginning, there are actually concerns from some Masons that Roosevelt is going to receive some special treatment. And without reading that whole quote I've got there, toward the end it says, "There will be no special dispensations and no 3 degrees in one night business. Teddy will feel more at home in the Senate as a Mason, a majority of the senators being members of the craft." So there are those who see this as logical, as it's good to welcome Roosevelt into their brotherhood. So he will be passed into the Fellowcraft degree on March 27th of 1901, just a few weeks after he is inaugurated as vice president under McKinley. And he was so well prepared for his exam that the story goes that he will correct his examiners who ask an incorrect question of him during the ritual. And there's actually sort of a moment of silence, and they have to go and look and see, and it turns out they were in fact incorrect in what they had asked. Roosevelt was a very, very studious man, and he was very, very well prepared. He will then be raised as a Master Mason on April 24th, 1901. And there's a legend here that I haven't been able to verify, but it's an amazing story, so I wanted to tell it. This legend is that there were so many people there. The stairs up the Oyster Bay Bank building were so crowded that they literally physically raised him over people's heads and carried him up the stairs to the lodge. Again, I haven't found any primary sources that back this story up, but boy, I hope it's true, because it is a really amusing story. Roosevelt's right-hand man, William Loeb Jr., will be his instructor for all 3 of his degrees. Loeb was first his private secretary and later his presidential secretary. He's one of his closest advisors, closest friends, and he will help him through this process. And Roosevelt will take Masonry very seriously. You see this picture of him here. This is 1912, so many years later. He is at the Masonic Temple in Spokane, Washington, there wearing his Masonry garb there. So let's talk about how this influences some of his life and his policies and how he carries himself. And in particular, I want to talk about the square deal, because the square deal is perhaps the most important concept, principle by which Roosevelt governs. And it's the name that's usually given specifically to his domestic legislative program. And historians often will divide this into 3 C's. This is not the way he did it, but others often will say that it's corporate regulation, consumer protection, and conservation of public lands are these sort of 3 pillars that are part of the square deal. And I have seen it argued, I would say pretty plausibly, that perhaps the idea of the square deal was influenced by the Masonic symbolism of the square. The steel square is a tool of accuracy, as a symbol of morality, honesty, so on and so forth. Do I think that was the only factor that led him to sort of think about this square deal? No. Do I think it's possible that was on his mind? Absolutely, I do. And the square deal is certainly something that, even if he wasn't consciously thinking of it, very much aligns with those kinds of values that he's learning as a Mason. He will say in one of his famous sort of square deal speeches at the New York State Fair in 1903, by this time he is president, and he will say, "We must act upon the motto of all for each and each for all. There must be ever present in our minds the fundamental truth that in a republic such as ours, the only safety is to stand neither for nor against any man because he is rich or because he is poor, because he is engaged in one occupation or another, because he works with his brains or because he works with his hands. We must treat each man on his worth and merits as a man. We must see that each is given a square deal, because he is entitled to no more and should receive no less." So this level playing field, right? This very, very even-handed treatment of everyone, this fair and honest treatment of everyone, is something that Roosevelt believes in so strongly. And that's certainly an aspect of his life that is being influenced by Masonry, I would argue. Again, probably not the only factor, but there's no doubt that it is one and that it's something that he is considering. So Roosevelt will deliver multiple addresses at lodges, or at least send letters often when he can't attend lodges, but he will attend lodges all over the world. So in addition to Oyster Bay, New York, and Washington, D.C., he goes to a lodge in Africa, in South America, in 1916, in Trinidad, in the Caribbean. He finds lodges wherever he can find them. So it is important to him, but he has, of course, got great demands on his time and resources. So it's not something he's always able to do. But when he speaks to the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania in 1902, he really lays out to him what Masonry means to him and how it influences him. And this is the sesquicentennial of the initiation of George Washington into Freemasonry. And on this occasion, he will say, one of the things that attracted me so greatly to Masonry, that I hailed the chance of becoming a Mason, was that it really did act up to what we as a government and as a people are pledged to, of treating each man on his merits as a man. Masonry teaches and fosters in the man the qualities of self-respect and self-help, the qualities that make a man fit to stand by himself. And yet it must foster in everyone who appreciates it as it should be appreciated, the beautiful and solemn ritual. It must foster in him a genuine feeling for the rights of others and for the feelings of others. So it's interesting here, right, that there's definitely some high morality and high ideals here, but it's also very practical for him, right? This is something that makes sense for people and government to do. It just, this is how we raise each other up and function as a society, is to behave this way toward each other and treat each other fairly and help each other when we need it, and to respect both ourselves and others. And this is something, again, you will see this theme over and over again in most speeches that he's giving, especially during his presidency. This is really important to him. Now, there is some backlash, as you might have imagined, might have expected, to TR becoming a Mason. In particular, there's backlash from the Catholic community at the time. And I found one particular reprinted quote here that I thought was very strong. And this Catholic newspaper editor says, when President Roosevelt asserts that Masonry must make the best type of American citizenship, he offers a positive and brutal insult to the millions of his fellow citizens who are not members, thank God, of the diabolical craft. His shallowness and Masonic enthusiasm may preclude him from recognizing the offense, but it is there. Again, the social problems which are forcing themselves for solution cannot be settled by any principles or lessons of Masonry. These problems are the result of man's departure from God's truth and the infraction of God's law. Now, that being said, I don't think this backlash was very widespread. I did not find a lot of comments like this. Part of that is I'm not sure how many people at the time knew Roosevelt was a Freemason. I'm not sure. But either way, I don't think most people would have felt this strongly negatively about it, precisely because of these values that he is espousing that everyone can get behind, really, of respect for fellow citizens and lifting each other up and making each other better. But there were some who were very much against it. And the Masons, for their part, the Masonic community has a lot of pride in Roosevelt being one of their members. I won't read out this entire thing here, but I will note that the Masonic Standard here mentions the sort of practicality of Masonry, eminently practical, they say. And as I mentioned, sort of alluded to earlier, he recognizes Freemasonry as the great leveler, which unites the high, the low, the rich, the poor, and conciliates true friendship among those who might otherwise have remained at a perpetual distance. So this is something that brings people together in a way that benefits us all, is the way the Masons see it and the way that Roosevelt sees it in particular. And they say the country is fortunate in having for its chief executive a man who has the courage and the capacity to apply the principles of Masonry to the problems of government. And I think many people probably agreed, whether they knew much about the Masonry aspect of it or not. I think those principles were really, really helpful to everyone. And there's some aspects of this here that, in terms of this equality, that I think are important to continue to talk about here. Religious equality was extremely important to Theodore Roosevelt. And he writes a letter to another politician, Thomas E. Watson. This is in 1915. At this time, Watson is a man who is very vocally anti-Semitic, anti-Catholic. He is racist. He is just about anti-everything you can think of. And Roosevelt will write this man a very, very long letter, basically speaking out against everything that Watson is speaking for. And he will tell Watson, "I am not only a Protestant, but a member of the Dutch Reformed Church. I am a Mason, but I should hold myself an unworthy citizen of the United States if I failed to treat and to insist upon the treatment of every one of my fellow citizens with absolute disregard of his creed. Whether he is Protestant or Catholic, Jew, Gentile, or agnostic is his own concern. He must be the master of his own soul. He must extend to others full liberty of religious belief, and he is entitled to receive the same treatment himself." And to me, this is something that, again, was influenced surely, at least in part, by Masonry, right? As long as you are moral and you share some kind of belief, in particular belief in a supreme being, or even not in its case, he says agnostic here too, which is interesting. But he believes everyone is equal and that spiritual matters are between a man and his creator. That is very important to him. This will actually come up during Taft's presidential campaign, William Howard Taft. Taft was a Unitarian, and there were some who were speaking out against Taft for that reason. And Roosevelt will tell people all that matters is that he treats people right and that he is a good public servant. So that will come up again, and again. And as we mentioned, there is some social equality at the heart of this as well. And he will tell a journalist toward the end of his life, it's 1919 when he tells this story that's become very, very famous. He says, "I violate no secret when I say that one of the greatest values in Masonry is that it affords an opportunity for men in all walks of life to meet on common ground, where for the time all men are equal and have one common interest. For example, when I was president, the master of my lodge was worshipful Brother Doughty, gardener on the estate of one of my neighbors, and a most excellent public-spirited citizen with whom I liked to maintain contact. Clearly, I could not call upon him socially when I came home. It would have embarrassed him. Neither could he, without embarrassment, call on me. In the lodge, it was different. He was over me, though I was president, and it was good for him and good for me." So again, there's this really heartfelt need for fellowship, right? Fellowship is very much at the core of all of this. And Roosevelt believes that people who engage in respect for one another, in fellowship with one another, in brotherhood with one another, are going to make all of society better. They're going to improve their own lives and the lives of others. And I think that Masonry had a lot to do with the way he saw the world. And with that, we have about 10 minutes left by our Zoom meeting time here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to thank you again for having me and welcome any questions or comments you may have.
Oh, I might as well stand in front of the camera, what the heck. Before we get too far into this, I want to note that this was one of the best presentations of the life of a Mason that I've ever seen.
Thank you.
I did not know, I knew that Teddy Roosevelt was a Mason. I did not know how deeply it had influenced his public and private life. One of the themes that I have going this year is Freemasonry in the 21st century. How do we adjust as Freemasons to what's going on? And when I do that, I like to look at the lives of Freemasons to use them as examples. So this works quite well. I have no, I'm going to I'm going to reserve my questions for a later time, so anybody else can ask some.
All right. Good evening. You see me?
Yes.
So let me be honest first. I'm a teacher of U.S. history. So I could take up an hour of your time one-on-one. Two questions. One is, and the second one is funny. So his governorship, right? The governorship that propelled him into the vice presidency. Was he aware when they made him vice president? Was he aware of like what I guess you would call them the corporate class, what the corporate class was trying to do? Was he aware of it, and did he understand it? What was going on with the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the JP Morgans and what they wanted to do? And then two is the funny question. So when he was remaking his image and into a Rough Rider, because you talked about his wife giving away the stuff to be auctioned. What happened to the Tiffany hunting knife that is in those photos, where he was remaking his image, but he had the $500 hunting knife from Tiffany's in it? I was just curious if that was if it was auctioned off, if it's known, if its presence is, if its location is known. Thank you.
So, to the first question, as far as when he was propelled into the vice presidency from the governorship, he certainly knew to some extent what was happening, although to him, the way he saw it, there were some people who were pushing him that direction for nefarious purposes, for their own reasons, and others who believed it actually was a good thing. But he certainly knew that he was seen as something of a rabble rouser, something of a radical in a way, right? A radical reformer. He is, a Republican and a staunch one in some ways, but he sees that differently than other Republicans do. And so he didn't want to be the vice president. He did not want it. He knew it was more or less a powerless, symbolic position, especially at that time. And he said that he would rather do nearly anything. He could take a job as a professor or do any other number of things. But more or less out of party loyalty, he will decide to take that position on. I don't think he foresaw that he would become president, at least not so quickly. So it was something that he really didn't want to do. But like I said, he did it anyway out of party loyalty and what he thought was best for the Republican Party. Your second question, I would have to look up the Tiffany knife. I know it still exists. I don't know if it's the Library of Congress who has it or if Sagamore Hill National Historic Site has it. I believe one of the historic sites still has that today. My guess would be actually Sagamore Hill, his home. They have a lot of his personal effects like that. But I would have to look that up to be certain. And that's a good time to tell you all, Ira or anyone, make sure anyone can have my contact information. Please reach out to me. It's my job to speak with you all, to answer any questions, any comments. So after this, I'm available to speak with you anytime. But thank you for those questions. If there are more, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, well, I used to be a reporter, so therefore I have lots of questions, but I'll keep it kind of short. One of the things I'm curious about was I can't remember the timeline. Was TR a Freemason at the time he was a Rough Rider?
No, he would not have been yet. So 1898 is the Spanish-American War. That's when he resigns as Secretary of the Navy to go fight in Cuba. And then when he becomes governor in 1899 is when he starts attending those public events. And then after that, in 1900 is when he actually is inducted into Freemasonry. So he is not a Mason yet when he is in the Spanish-American War.
You mentioned that there were a lot of Freemasons in government at the time he was president. And I'm curious to see if you know whether he interacted on a Masonic level with those folks.
I didn't see any like primary source that didn't come up in the bit of research I did for this presentation, but the answer just logically almost certainly has to be yes. Both in the state government and in the federal government. In the federal government, William McKinley, also a Freemason, William Howard Taft, also a Freemason. So some of the other presidents were as well. I imagine a fair number of Congress people, of senators and congressmen representatives were. So I would have to look deeper into the sources to know, to sort of find specific instances. But we know, if nothing else, William McKinley was also a Mason, so they may have interacted on that level. And again, lots of people in state government in Albany, things like that.
The 30-year-old something. Here's a silly question which does not require a serious answer. Now, it's known that he was a prolific hunter. I'm assuming I'm on track with the right president, considering a Tiffany hunting knife. That confirms it. Now, do you think, as a non-Mason, do you think that and he's also quite public about being a Mason and representatives and whatnot. Do you think that what was more convenient or a priority for him to schedule his hunting sprees around Masonic events and locations where that would be appropriate for him, or vice versa? Would he be hunting for the sake of the meetings, or meetings for the sake of the huntings?
Yeah, so he absolutely, he would go to meetings, go to lodges when he traveled and go to other things, but he's not necessarily scheduling his trips around different Masonic events and meetings and what have you. In fact, we have many letters in our digital library that show he often is writing people, sorry, I can't come to this event or this meeting. Sorry, I can't come to this. Occasionally, he will send letters for specific events and things, and he will dutifully pay his dues to the Matinacock Lodge in Oyster Bay. We've got the records of his secretary, William Loeb, making sure those dues come in. But yeah, the Masonry is important to him, and he will go to those meetings, to those lodges when he can. But in terms of scheduling, it's almost never his actual priority, unfortunately.
There being no other questions, I'll just ask one. Did he have a Masonic funeral?
No, he did not. Now, what's interesting, you may know this, I have heard that the largest Masonic funeral in United States history was actually held for someone he was affiliated with, and that was Buffalo Bill Cody. He had a very large Masonic funeral in Denver when he died, not a similar time, just a couple of years before TR did, if I remember correctly. But no, TR did not have a Masonic funeral. He did have a very large funeral, but not a Masonic one.
FYI, I did a presentation some time ago about Buffalo Bill's Freemason, and I used pictures of the procession, which was as long as the Macy's Day Parade.
Yes, it was huge.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it.